Why do they keep appearing in your thoughts, even now, not as a memory, but as something else? A presence, a vibration, a shadow walking beside you in the silence of your chest. You don't see their face, but you feel it, in the way the wind pauses, in the way a name on a billboard aches like a wound you can't locate. They're not in your life anymore, but they live in the space between your thoughts, in dreams, in songs, in that strange stillness when everything feels full of something that's not there. Carl Jung once wrote that we encounter ourselves again and again in 1,000 disguises, and sometimes the disguise is a person who touched your soul so deeply, it wasn't their touch you remembered, it was what they awakened in you. Joe Dispenza explains how emotionally intense experiences create neural patterns, loops of feeling, of memory, of chemistry that refire long after the moment is gone. So the question is not, why can't I stop thinking about them, but rather, what is my soul trying to reflect back to me through this person's absence? This is not a video about forgetting, it's a journey of decoding what you projected, of seeing the mirror behind the memory, of recognizing the wound behind the name, of tracing the echo until you remember who you were when you loved them. It wasn't their voice that stayed, nor their smile, nor the shape of their hands. What stayed was the feeling, a longing that was already there, long before they arrived, a hunger you never learned to name, but that suddenly had a face, a tone, a scent. Sometimes the ones who haunt us are not really them. They are carriers of something older. They awaken an echo from a childhood moment we buried, a goodbye that was never spoken, an affection that never came, a promise that was never fulfilled. Jung taught that we fall for what we lost in ourselves. The anima, the animus, these inner figures take flesh and walk beside us as if they were real, but they are soul mirrors, living dreams that pull us to what is unlived in us. They enter your thoughts not only because of who they were, but because of what they stirred. That moment of emotional recognition, a memory from before memory, not of them, of you. The haunting is not a curse, it is a clue. They told you that if you kept thinking about them, the universe would bring them back. That your thoughts were magnets, that love could be manifested by will, but there's a thin, trembling line between spiritual alignment and emotional fixation disguised as faith. You weren't trying to manifest them. You were trying to make sense of the emptiness, to turn the echo into a sign, to transform pain into prophecy. Joe Dispenza teaches that emotionally charged thoughts don't just linger, they imprint. They create grooves in the nervous system, like rivers of memory flowing through your body, even when the person is no longer there. And so you loop, not because you're delusional, but because your body remembers, and your mind tries to turn memory into destiny. But what if the universe isn't responding to your desire, but mirroring your repetition? Instead of asking, how do I bring them back? A deeper question rises from the silence. What am I unconsciously rehearsing every time I remember them? What if it wasn't about keeping them? What if the gift was never the person, but the story they awakened in your depths? There are connections that seem to glow with destiny, but not all of them were meant to last. Some were only meant to stir, to unseal an inner box you had sealed shut long ago. You loved their intensity, their presence, their tenderness, but were those truly theirs, or were they a reflection of the parts of yourself you had exiled? Jung spoke of projection as the soul's first language. We see outside what we cannot yet feel inside. We fall in love with what we once were or what we're still afraid to become. Some relationships vanish, not because they were illusions, but because their mission was never permanence, only revelation. They delivered the message, the mirror, the awakening. Now, it is no longer about finding them again. It is about retrieving the part of you that was left behind in their presence. The part that knew how to feel, how to want, how to glow. It happens in a breath. You hear their name, and suddenly your chest tightens. A flush rises to your cheeks. A memory floods your skin before your thoughts even catch up. They haven't touched you in months, but your body still reacts as if they just walked in the room. Joe Dispenza explains that the body becomes the memory. It encodes the past into flesh. Until you are no longer remembering, you are reliving. It's not madness, it's not weakness, it's the silent truth of a nervous system that once found identity through pain. To remember is not always a thought. Sometimes it's a sensation, an ache behind the ribs, a pulse that returns like an unfinished sentence, and so you carry their frequency. Not because you want to, but because part of you still lives in that emotional atmosphere, still believes that the past might somehow complete itself if you keep feeling. But healing isn't forgetting, it's recognizing which part of you still tightens when their name is whispered in your mind. That tension, that is your doorway. What if they didn't just reflect your longing, but the version of you that had only just begun to awaken? There are people who arrive not to complete us, but to reveal who we were becoming when we met them. They saw a part of you that even you hadn't yet dared to claim. Your sensuality, your courage, your ability to be seen without apology. Jung reminds us that relationships are often mirrors of our undeveloped potential. And sometimes the ache they leave behind is not for them, but for the self that flickered alive in their presence. You weren't haunted by who they were. You were haunted by who you were when your soul stood up straighter, spoke louder, loved deeper. There's a sacred conflict there between who you were and who you're still afraid to become. They weren't the destination. They were the mirror on the path. And now that version of you is waiting, not for their return, but for your own. You see their initials on a passing license plate, their birthday on a receipt. A song plays that you both once called yours. Right when you thought of them, it feels like the universe is whispering. But is it calling them back or calling you inward? Jung called this synchronicity. When something inside aligns with something outside, not by chance, but by meaning. These signs are not just about them, they are symbols, reflections, echoes of unresolved emotion waiting to be witnessed. You don't need to ask, are they thinking of me? The real question is, what is this sign asking me to feel, to remember, to integrate right now? Your psyche speaks in metaphors, in dreams, in strange coincidences that are not accidents, but invitations to pause, to feel, to understand the silent language of your soul. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. She met him in a season of softness, the kind of timing that feels orchestrated by something larger than life. They barely knew each other, but the connection burned with recognition, brief, intense, unexplainable. And when he left, something in her didn't leave with him. She spent over a year believing she missed him, that it was about his smile, his energy, his attention. Until one afternoon in the quiet of therapy, a truth rose from beneath the ache. I don't miss him, she whispered. I miss me when I was with him. Because in his gaze she had felt radiant, touched, allowed, alive. He had mirrored back a self she had forgotten she could be. And when he vanished, it wasn't just his absence she grieved. It was the version of herself who bloomed in that mirror. So she wrote a letter, but not to him, to herself. I remember who I was with you, she wrote, and I don't need you to keep her. That was the real closure. Not forgetting, not erasing, but reclaiming. He faded because she finally returned to herself. There's a part of you still sitting beside them, still holding that conversation that never truly ended, still believing that maybe, if you feel it hard enough, time might turn back. But it doesn't, because time never really left. Obsession is often self-time travel, not to a person, but to a moment, an identity, a version of yourself who didn't get to finish the story. You're not haunted by them. You're haunted by the fragment of yourself that stayed behind, waiting in that memory, frozen in that kiss, suspended in that silence. Jung understood that what the psyche cannot integrate, it repeats over and over until the self is brought home. So the question is not, how do I stop thinking of them? But rather, what part of me stayed behind when they left? What story did I never get to finish writing? You don't need to sever the bond. You need to retrieve the self. The soul doesn't fixate to torment. It fixates to recover what was lost. You don't keep thinking of them because you're broken. You keep thinking of them because your psyche is still speaking softly, symbolically, persistently. This isn't about holding on. It's about remembering what the connection revealed. Not about them, but about you. What they stirred may have hurt, but it was sacred data. A message from the soul, wrapped in longing. A fragment of your story waiting to be read, not as a romance, but as a reflection. The ache isn't punishment, it's presence. A call to reclaim the version of you that still lingers in that room, still waits in that memory, still believes that healing means forgetting. But true release is not forgetting. It is retrieving the self you left behind, the voice you silenced, the light that flickered and frightened you with its clarity. Jung said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." Dispenza reminds us, where attention goes, energy flows, and identity grows. And so if they still haunt your thoughts, perhaps the echo is not theirs, it is yours. Don't silence the echo, follow it, trace it, and you may find that it leads not to the one you lost, but to the self you are finally ready to claim. If you made it this far, comment below, "Estoy despierta." Let others know they're not alone in this awakening. The next video will guide you through why the soul creates emotional bonds with those who leave. Until then, honor your echoes. They are not signs of madness, but invitations to return home.